Hey everyone, I'm Jeanette from Jeanette Knits, and if you ever wondered what goes on behind the scenes in a knitwear designer's life, then you're in the right place. I've published over 100 patterns on Ravelry in just over 6 years, and I've learned so much along the way that I thought it was time to pull back the curtain and share it all with you. A lot of you in my newsletter and social media asked some incredible questions, and there were so many that there was no way I could fit all of that in one video. So I've decided to divide this into a video series of 5 videos where we'll dive deep into everything you'd like to know. Today we're talking about my knitting journey, how it all started, my time management and daily routines. In the following videos I'll cover my design process, some technique and tool tips, as well as the business side of things. So grab your project and let's get started. The question that I got asked the most, I think it was over 10 times, is how many hours a day I knit. And here's the thing, it's actually not that many. I'm a little bit of a data nerd, so I'm tracking my time. And over the last 3 months, I've averaged about 70 hours per month of pure knitting. And that works out about just over 2 hours a day. And I am very obsessively consistent with this. I do knit every day. Well, of course, not every day I'll get to knit for 2 hours. Some days I'll just have 30 minutes while dinner's cooking. And some other days I'll be in the zone for 4 or 5 hours. Of course, taking breaks in the middle, because knitting for 4 hours in one sitting, that's a little bit mad. But with this consistency, it lets me finish about 2 projects a month and lets me therefore release a couple of patterns a month. Someone asked more specifically if I have a secret to 24 hours a day or if I am the fastest knitter in the world, and I wish I had both of those things. I am a reasonably fast, but by no means the fastest. There is a lady called Miriam Teggels in the Netherlands who currently holds the world record in speed knitting, and she can achieve 118 stitches per minute. So I had to try and time myself and try and see how fast I can do. When I did that, I was really pushing my pace and knitting as fast as I could, and I could get to 76 stitches a minute. That's around 65% of the world record. And also I was really pressing hard. If I had continued in that pace, I'd probably get massive cramps. So generally when I knit on my sofa, I do not knit at the max speed. So yeah, no, I have 24 hours a day and I am nowhere near the fastest knitter in the world. Another person asked me if I ever sleep. Yeah, I do sleep, I promise. Actually, right now I am in the middle of a training block for half a marathon. So I do have to find time every day to go for a run or do some workout and actually prioritize sleep so I can recover and train again the next day. I also have a couple of young children who demand attention. So even if I wanted to, I wouldn't be able to work all the time. And because I track my time, I can tell you that on average, I work about 8 hours a day, which is a normal work day. But again, just like with knitting, some days I work less when I have some family things going on or I prioritize self-care, and some things when I'm really in the zone with some complicated grading, then I'll stay up a little bit later, but that's quite rare. But here's the thing, when you do what you love, it doesn't even feel like work. I know it's a cliche, but it's true. I don't feel like I work 8 hours a day. And I guess the secret is that I don't do this alone. I have a team of people on whom I rely to get stuff done and let me focus on what I do best. I work with a technical editor who's always there to check my work. My sister handles all the photography needs. I work with translators and graphic designers, and most importantly, my teammate Liane and also my daughter are helping me by working part-time and doing a lot of the social media heavy lifting and community management and of course customer support. It's freeing to lean on other people's strength where I have weaknesses. That way I can spend my energy on design and growing the business without sacrificing quality or work-life balance. My days are pretty varied too. I'll spend some time writing, grading patterns, answering customer questions, answering test knitter questions, arranging new partnerships with yarn companies, organizing knit-alongs and engaging with the knit-along participants, also teaching workshops and creating content for my video courses and new workshops. There's always something different happening, which keeps things exciting. The next set of questions are more about my origin story and the knitting learning journey. People love asking me how I got started and who taught me. So I remember my grandma was the one who was teaching me. I must have been around 5 years old. And all I remember was that she was merciless. Whenever she saw a missed stitch or my gauge tightening, she would just rip it apart and say, start over, that's not good enough. Even though at first I thought she was being very mean, eventually I realized that it actually taught me that making mistakes isn't the end of the world, it's just part of the process. Another question was if I remember my first sweater. Unfortunately, I don't remember my first sweater because I know it must have been for a Barbie doll, because at that age I'm sure I did not have enough patience for a human-sized one. But I do have proof that when I was 11, as a school project, we had to do a pair of socks. And because I had only worked some rectangles and sewn them up together to make little sweaters, I carved down a sock construction with the Dutch heel. That was a mind-blowing game changer for me. I was fascinated that with knitting you could create all these shapes and forms, and you didn't even have to cut or seam things afterwards. So yeah, the sock was my first aha moment with knitting constructions. My first real sweater for myself, I think I was about 13 when I made a crew neck, a fitted crew neck using a bunch of colorful leftover yarns. And I remember I had this black garter border between each color change, and I was so proud of that one. I wore it constantly. And then later, I think a year later, I had to do a sweater as a school project, and I made a red mohair and wool. So there was a section of mohair and section of wool in a lace chevron pattern. Another sweater in pieces with quite dramatic trumpet sleeves. And after those two, I think that whenever I saw a sweater in the shop that I liked and I most definitely could not afford, I always figured out how to make it. The yarn might have been questionable quality, but it's what I could get my hands on and got the job done. Another funny question was, how did you learn all this? And it's funny because I'm not sure what all this means. I always see knitting as this super huge, vast pool of skills and techniques that no one person could ever know in their lifetime. And even though I've been learning all my life, I've been paying attention to knitting related things since I was little, I still feel like I've only scratched the tip of the iceberg, and that's why I love it so much, because there's always something new to discover. But yeah, at school we had to do knitting, so that gave me good basics and understanding. In high school I also attended a sewing club which covered the pattern cutting basics, so I have a fairly good understanding of the garment construction, very, very basic garment construction. But for years I did everything in pieces and seamed, because that's what the way was then, mimicking sewing. It wasn't actually until just before I published my first pattern, when I discovered the top-down and seamless sweater and garment construction. And that was an absolute game changer. And to try and answer the question about all the other things that I've learned since, it's just been by doing. The secret is to pick your next project to be just a little bit outside your comfort zone and to get comfortable with that discomfort and the risk that things that might not work out from the first get-go. But what have you got to lose? Either way, you'll learn something very valuable. Another question I got often was if I recommend any books or resources to learn. And honestly, I can't recommend books. My personal main resources have been YouTube and Google. I've also attended workshops from other teachers in yarn festivals, and those have been very inspiring and eye-opening. But apart from the Japanese stitch library, I don't really use any books in my knitting. I feel that in the case of knitting techniques and tips, videos are just so much superior than books are, and at this day and age it's very easy to access videos and they don't take up any space in your bookshelf either. So yeah, I recommend resources online, and I think that if you're just starting out, my best tip for you would be don't go looking for knitting videos on techniques and stuff. Go look for something that you actually want to make and try and make it, even if it looks overcomplicated for what you think you can do. You just have to try, and as soon as you get stuck, you can Google or search on YouTube for the bit that you're stuck with, and chances are you'll have 100 people trying to help you and show you how to do it. And one thing will lead to another. Everything is doable if you just take it step by step, and you will have learned more than you would by just reading a knitting book. And it doesn't matter how long you've been knitting, even if you've been knitting 70 years and all you've been doing is socks. That is kind of a very, very thin chapter of the knitting book, or even just a page, I'd say. It matters how many different things you've tried and how much you challenge yourself to grow. And most importantly, don't force it. Follow your interest. If you are currently into lace knitting, don't try and do your first cable sweater because you're going to struggle with motivation. Pick a lace thing that you might not have tried before, and before you know it, you'll have 3 new techniques in your toolbox. And someone asked me how I am able to manage so many projects at the same time, as it seems like I've got 6 or 8 patterns on the go. And you're absolutely right. I do have at least 6, if not all 8, on the go at the same time, because it takes about 4 to 5 months for a pattern to go from idea to the released thing, and that is 16 to 20 weeks. So if I want to release a pattern, I have to start thinking about the yarn and the design 16 to 20 weeks prior to the release date. And in those 16 weeks, because I release a pattern every couple of weeks, so twice a month, in those 16 weeks, I can fit 8 releases. So there are at least 7 other patterns at the various stages in that time frame that are happening. So each pattern will go through the ideation and design, writing and grading, me knitting the sample, and then technical editing. Then we have test knitting, and finally a layout, translations, and the launch. While it might sound daunting for some, I used to be a programmer, a software engineer, and then I moved into management. So I managed software engineering teams, cross-functional teams, and I was quite good at it. So I have brought all of that experience into my own business, and I'm treating the pattern life cycle just as I would a software development life cycle. I've got a massive spreadsheet that I call called the pipeline, with all the patterns and the timelines and the milestones as they go through the stages. And I've got the standard operating procedures described for each stage about what needs to be done, who can do it, and of course I also make sure I communicate with everybody involved in a timely manner so there's no surprises and no stress, and it's a pretty well-oiled machine by now. Even though the process is very standardized and repeatable, every single design I do has something new and exciting knitting wise, so I always am learning and discovering new things, and that's how I keep things exciting for myself. There was a question if I ever get overwhelmed with the number of works in progress and if I've had my knitting mojo disappear. I can't say that I've had my knitting mojo disappear, but I've definitely felt like I'm done with some projects before they're even close to being done. And that is usually because I get my aha moment from seeing how my vision's becoming a reality. And as soon as that is clear, as soon as the complicated parts are over and they're all fitting the way I want, the rest just becomes knitting, and it's very predictable and there's no risk, so I don't find it that exciting. And as soon as, if I'm in that state with a project, let's say there's only like sleeves left or something, as soon as I see some really interesting new yarn, I'll just get this really strong urge to cast on a new project, and that's when I'm really a little bit frustrated that I still have so much of the current work in progress to do. But it's also a very great motivator because I do set myself deadlines and I try and stick to them as much as possible, because there's so many people involved in actually releasing a pattern that if I try and change some deadline, there will be consequences down the line. So I keep that very the desire to start the new project at the back of my mind, and that just lets me just get it done, and it is the true motivator to get things done. And that's part 1 of this video series. I hope it gives you a little taste of what goes on behind the scenes, and let me know in the comments what surprised you the most, or what other things of the behind the scenes type you'd like to hear more about. Next time we'll dive into my design process, how ideas become patterns, and all the details pertaining to that. So don't forget to subscribe for the rest of the series, and as usual, I'll see you in the next one.